college baseball fans. I am Monty Taylor. We're a little bit short today because Mark decided to go golfing. Noah is dealing with Noah and AJ are dealing with personal issues. I am joined by the jester of college baseball, Jake Hot Takes McKeever. Jake, how are you doing?
Monty, it's good to be back. I know that you and I haven't done an ACC show in a little bit, so it's good to kind of relive old times. It feels like we're back at the start of the season, going over our bold takes and how they're gonna flop. But excited to be here on a Saturday.
Yeah, about a week and a half ago, Jake told me that he was hurt, that I have not come up with a show for him and I to do, and I took him off the ACC coverage because we had too many hosts. And so here we are. I've made it up to you. We can take another couple months break before we do another one.
Yeah, I think that this will probably be it for me and you on individual shows until probably the draft. So
Possibly. We had a great slate of college baseball games yesterday. I mean, wow. Especially in the ACC. There were only 4 ACC games with exam breaks, but yeah, a lot of good stuff. We're going to get right into it. Jake is going to kick us off with Arkansas at Kentucky, right? They were on the road.
yes, yeah. So Hagen Smith just continues to impress in every sense of the word. With the Ryan Prager loss, he's now the last undefeated Friday night guy at 9-0. 6 innings, 14 Ks. It's weird that he's done this so much that it almost kind of becomes an afterthought. Like I really want to talk more about Kendall Diggs. Kendall Diggs was tremendous. He had the 2 big hits. He had the one in the 6th that kind of gave him the lead, and then he had one inning later that really broke it open. But I really am starting to worry about Kentucky. I know that they still sit at number 9, but they've lost 5 of 6 in the SEC now. That includes this one at home and then the last 2 at Tennessee at home. They still have an RPI of 3, but you almost feel like there's going to be 4 or 5 SEC teams. And the way that State and South Carolina have just kind of been on resurgences, Kentucky probably has to start feeling a little bit of the pressure that they are going to have to go on the road here in the tournament. Is that kind of what you're seeing too, Monty?
Yeah, I mean, it's just there's not much room for error because there are other teams chomping at the bit, and that's going to be the case in both the SEC and the ACC, as you can't have everyone host in those 2 conferences. So there's teams in both conferences that are ready to jump at the chance to host if one of the teams that are currently projected to host falters a bit, and so Kentucky's got to figure out a way to, if they don't win this series, they're going to have to bounce back very, very quickly.
Yeah, and it's not going to get any easier in the SEC too as well. That's kind of, I guess, not the luxury, but they played a lot of their lighter opponents at the start of the year. So now here down the stretch, I mean, they've just been playing murderer's row, it seems like, in the SEC.
Yeah, and there's not a whole lot of light schedule to begin with, right?
Yeah,
So
there's only so many times you can play Missouri and Auburn.
right, right, and Missouri and Auburn aren't gimmies either, as Florida has figured out. So moving along to our next one, we've got Troy and Louisiana, 2 teams in the Sun Belt that are working hard to try and get in the conversation. I mean, right now those teams are looking like 2 seeds, right?
I don't know. So Troy's kind of an interesting one because the tear that they've been on the last few weeks, they swept Coastal last week, and then they got Louisiana at home, which are kind of the 2 class of the Sun Belt. I know Coastal's a little bit down there, but I mean, just the way that Troy's kind of gone in, handled business, especially with Louisiana beating Southern Miss, keeping their RPI a little bit higher than it probably should be. I think Troy's kind of working themselves into that last mid-major host spot that's occupied by Indiana State right now. And again, it's just been one of the hottest teams I think I've ever seen. Kyle Mock had the 7 RBIs. I know that this was 16-5, but truth be told, it really wasn't that close. Louisiana kind of added on there late. But some notes, Kyle DeBarge still kind of continues to impress for the University of Louisiana. He's starting to look a lot like a Sun Belt type play of the year. But again, just the run that Troy has been on, I don't think I've seen in the Sun Belt in a very, very long time. It always seems to be such a log jam of, where can you steal series? And Troy just seems to be beating everybody these days.
And the Sun Belt to me might be the 3rd or 4th strongest conference in the country. Well, probably not 3rd, but they're 4th or 5th behind Big 12, ACC, SEC, the Sun Belt is got some good quality teams in there.
Yeah, their lower end kind of drags them down a little bit. I would take the Sun Belt's top 5 though to win 3 over the Big 12's top 5 too as well. I mean, there's a ton of teams in here that are super super deep, and it really is kind of looking like a 3-bid league where a fourth is going to have a legitimate gripe and legitimate argument to be left out. Like Troy's playing good, Louisiana's leading. Coastal always seems to kind of get not favorable regionals, but they went out and played a good non-conference schedule. Georgia Southern's good. Georgia State's kind of playing
And
up. There's just a ton.
James Madison's got a really high RPI, right?
Yeah, I know. Micah's really wanted to put James Madison there. They're another one that's there. I mean, Texas State was supposed to be one of the better teams coming into it, and they sit under 500 in the Sun Belt. I think that really just kind of speaks to the depth, because they really were the talk of Houston, and you kind of thought that they were going to go on a roll, and the depth of the Sun Belt has just kind of eaten them alive. But, just to kind of get back to the main point, I think Troy is starting to kind of work themselves into being a host here. I think they're going to be a very, very dangerous 15 team, which if you're an ECU fan, that gets an ACC, SEC team likely away from your regional. So if you're a Pirate faithful, you want to root for Troy or Louisiana to be hosts. It would make your regionals a lot easier.
Yeah, and I was bringing up the strength of the Sun Belt to kind of show that Troy is not just beaten up on a true mid-major conference. I mean, technically, by definition, they're mid-major, but not really as strong as they are. So Troy doing what they're doing recently is really, really impressive. Moving along to the ACC, we had a doubleheader. We've got some weather here on the East Coast coming in, I believe, today. So Georgia Tech and Clemson, South Carolina. Clemson decided to make the move to do a doubleheader on Friday instead of playing today. The first game, not super competitive. Clemson really dominated that baseball game, 11-4. The final never really felt that close, even in the early goings. Aiden Finateri, not his best start. We know he's capable of much better than that. But what a game the second game was. I was
going to say, Monty, I'm surprised you didn't make this one the lead-in in the show. Like, this could have seemed like your wheelhouse. Everybody was still working, had the game on in the background, and then Georgia Tech just went to work there at the end of the game, too.
Yeah, I was at VCU hosting George Washington. I was in the press box. I had to throw the radio broadcast on for Georgia Tech. Colin Lacey does a great job calling those games for the Yellow Jackets, but I was like, I got to throw this on because this is unbelievable. Because they had come back, it was 8-3, and they had cut the lead to 8-7 late, and you're like, okay, cool. Georgia Tech needs to put some zeros up, and then unfortunately they couldn't do that, and all of a sudden it's 12-7, and you're like, okay, Georgia Tech's done. But then they come back again, and both comebacks are highlighted by 2 3-run bombs by Drew Burress, who with all that going on broke the freshman record at Georgia Tech for home runs in the season. And then Mike Bacchetti in the top of the ninth, down to their last out, runner on base, 2-run blast to make it 13-12, and then Vaughn Lackey went back to back as a pinch hitter behind him to make it 14-12, give them a little bit of insurance. But shout out Mason Patel. He came in the 8th and 9th inning and put up zeros when the rest of the Georgia Tech pitching staff could not. And just a gritty win for the Yellow Jackets, who have, by the way, coming into this, had won 4 ACC series in a row. They're currently a 3 seed in our projections. Big win. And Clemson still making some mistakes defensively. I mean, you see Austin Gordon had given up 4 total runs, but he only got credited with 1 earned run due to some defensive miscues. But we got to shout out Blake Wright. I mean, the kid is unbelievable. 10 RBIs on the day yesterday with 3 home runs and a double. Lot of great baseball to be played. And it's going to be a really interesting rubber match for Clemson, Georgia Tech.
At what point do you think that the people start walking Drew Burress as opposed to pitching to him? Because
the problem is Matthew Ellis. He had a home run in both games too, and he hits behind Burress.
They just both continue to impress, because Drew Burress doesn't really strike you as, big physical guy, almost like a Hunter Hines. Like you always picture guys like that breaking home run records, and Drew Burress is a center fielder that's doing it. And credit to the approach that he has at the plate. It really, even though he gets 2 strikes, he's always still trying to drive the ball. I think that's kind of not necessarily the criticism of him, but that's kind of his one flaw. But again, the flip side of that is he still generates a ton of power with 2 strikes. So I really like what I've been seeing from Drew Burress going forward. And again, Georgia Tech's kind of starting to play their way into being into a regional, which is something that I know you as an ACC guy were always saying, but it always kind of felt like an afterthought. Like a lot of things would have to go right, and a lot of things have gone right for them the last 4 weeks.
Well, and what's interesting is a lot of what's gone right is Aiden Finateri and Cam Jones in the first 2 weekend roles pitching really well. They didn't do that this weekend. They've still got a win against the top 5 teams. So that's really, really big for them. So moving along to Mississippi State, Alabama. This was a run rule, correct? 7 innings.
Yes. They do have those in the SEC, Monty.
They have them in the ACC as well now.
It's such a weird thing, too. Like, I get it on, like, a Sunday, but, like, a Friday, I would have liked to see Mississippi State, like, not necessarily use more of their bullpen, but honestly, this one was 13-3, but it really wasn't even that close. It was 13-0 after the 4th inning. Hunter Hines had 2 home runs, and they were not cheat home runs. They were almost out of the stadium. Armani Larry had another one. Bryson Chance had a home run as well. So Mississippi State has an RPI of 19. They sit at 13-9 in SEC play and have Arkansas and Missouri going forward. How do you feel about them as a host? Because it really kind of, as Kentucky's kind of started to fall back here a little bit, I think Mississippi State's kind of starting to play their way into being a host. And the schedule is starting to set up a little bit for the Bulldogs.
I mean, I wouldn't put it past them. Again, the SEC is going to get a good number of hosts, and with if Alabama's faltering, if Kentucky's faltering, Mississippi State, and we discussed earlier, South Carolina are going to be right there, ready to pounce and take those spots. And it's just going to be kind of playoff baseball if you're trying to chase a host spot.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was thinking too, as those other teams fall back. Alabama sits at 2-6 on a Friday. As you start to kind of project them to be a 2 seed in a regional, that's something that really kind of starts to bring alarm, just because they're likely going to have to face a 3 seed as opposed to a 4. And Greg Ferrone was decent. I know he had the 7 runs, but again, it wasn't like he was missing a ton of bats. I wouldn't say he was unlucky, but State just had a very, very fine approach, and they stuck to it. TJ McCants was 0 for 4 with 3 Ks. I think if Bama expects to go far, it's going to have to be on his bat. He's got to start taking better at bats going forward. And again, they only had 1 extra base hit. Like in the SEC, you're not going to win a ton of games singling people to death. That's just really not how you play that kind of baseball. And again, especially with the pitching that they're getting, Alabama really, really kind of starts to worry me here. And you almost want to put them on a fraud watch where, not every SEC team can win their regional. Bama feels like the one that's really kind of starting to slide back here.
Yeah, I mean, they've got again, the SEC is a gauntlet. So, they've got opportunities ahead of them, but they've also got tall tasks.
Yeah, it's a tough. And again, no one's going to bat an eye. I mean, granted, they got run roll, but no one's really going to bat an eye if you go on the road to lose to Mississippi State. But when you start compounding these, and again, you look up and they're 2-6 in Saturday and Friday games. They're, really, really sliding back in SEC play here. And again, they've played a gauntlet. Like, I'm not going to say they've played an easy schedule, but it's at what point do you kind of blink and say, okay, they're under 500 in the SEC? Like, they're really not that far from missing the tournament completely, which almost feels crazy to say that they're the 16th team in the country and they are at risk for missing the tournament.
That does seem kind of crazy. I'm not really sure how to respond to your craziness, Jake.
Well, I was going to say they sit at 9-13, and if they get 11 wins in the SEC, they don't make the tournament. 12 win gets you 18% of the tournament, and they feel like they are in that kind of 18%. But if you really want to feel comfortable, you have to kind of get in that 14 range, and it looks like a very, very uphill battle for Alabama to get into a 14 range.
That is pretty crazy. That's interesting. We'll have to keep an eye on them over the next couple of weeks. Moving on, we're going to go to the Big Ten. They're probably a 1-bid league this year after getting 3 in last year. Does that sound right, Jake?
I don't know. If you would have told me that 10 days ago, I would have agreed with it. But Purdue's up on the screen. They are playing lights out baseball and are really starting to kind of push their way into
And at large, if they don't
at
make the
large.
tournament,
It feels like it's them and Nebraska, whereas before it would have been like Nebraska or. But Purdue really is kind of sliding in and being that one. And their RPI is really starting to shoot up. They did drop that series to the Fighting Micahs, but again, I think that they've really been playing good baseball down in the Big Ten, which they're probably going to be the 1 seed in the Big Ten tournament. I know it's them in Illinois right now, but they've been playing tremendous baseball. And again, what happened to Indiana? I felt like they were going to be like a darling, that they were just going to bang the ball around the yard. I think I used the quote that we feel like we're on a collision course with Iowa's pitching and Indiana's hitting. And, it might be a good first round matchup in the Big Ten or a good losers bracket game, but it's not what we thought it was going to be at all.
I'm still feeling betrayed by Iowa and Noah, who convinced us all that Iowa was legit. I mean, I understand on paper that pitching staff for Iowa is great, but getting to Purdue, they've been a great surprise. Big win to start the series here because Indiana, they're not who we thought they were, but that doesn't mean they're any less dangerous.
I think they still hit like that. I mean,
right.
Everybody that was in there before like is still on the team, so they can still put up 12, 15 runs at the blink of an eye. It's just they're running out of time to do it.
Right. But Devin Taylor, Josh Pine, they had good games yesterday in the loss, but you got to credit Jordan Morales for Purdue, who he almost gets the quality start. He falls 1 out short of the actual quality start stat, but only gives up the 2 earned runs. And then the bullpen kind of just did enough the rest of the way. I mean, Avery Cook and Aaron Saval, they each give up a run each, but that's fine when you're leading by 5 and you end up winning by 3. So big win for Purdue to start this series off against Indiana. They are at home, so that probably helps a little bit as well. But they should be able to pull this series out.
Yeah, they sit at 12-4, a game up on Nebraska and Illinois in the Big Ten. Iowa right now is a 6 seed, so they technically would make the Big Ten tournament. Maryland would miss, Rutgers would miss. It's just been a weird year in the Big Ten.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're moving along to a big upset last night, right? LSU taking down the number 1 team in the country on Friday night, 6-4. Jake, talk to me, Goose.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was really glued in on this one. Ryan Prager gets his first loss of SEC play. They have lost a few starts with him, but it was his first loss, period. Gage jump, I think, was tremendous, from the jump, if you will. But, A&M kind of got to him early. Jace Lavalette had the home run in the first. Ali Camarillo homered later. And LSU really kind of took the blows. And then in those middle innings, you blink, and Gage Jump has quickly rattled off 3 straight innings where he's only allowed 1 run across those 3. A&M did some questionable decisions, just bringing in Josh Stewart there and Wilson. I think Sloss is still kind of looking for that lights-out bullpen guy. I wouldn't say that he was trying to lose this game per se, but you could tell he's definitely has a bigger picture in mind, just trying to find more bullpen arms. Because, again, it's going to be Evan Ashtenbach. It's going to be Brad Rudis. Do you move Shane Sadejo in? There's still a lot up in the air in terms of the A&M bullpen, and you saw somebody like Josh Stewart, pitch matchup, not really good. But the flip side of that is Brad Rudis threw 3 innings, only 1 hit down the stretch, and really kind of kept A&M in it. And then it really felt like, for all the stuff that LSU's kind of put up with this year, when they had the Travinsky home run get called back for fan interference, then Jace Lavalette legs out and they flip a call. It almost felt like A&M was going to get a home run from Braden Montgomery and win 7-6 just because it's like a weird baseball thing. But again, credit to LSU and what that they were able to do on that side. And then Josh Pearson just finding a hole the other way. It seemed like something a month ago LSU wouldn't have found those holes. But again, credit to them to answering the bell. And again, I'll say this. You know how much we love to clown on Tommy White? He played Gold Glove level defense last night.
He has
like Gold Glove, not routine. Okay, our expectations are so low with Tommy White. Like, he stole 3 hits.
He's clearly worked incredibly hard
Yes.
on his defense because a couple times that I've tuned into LSU, I've seen him make plays, and I'm like, who is that at third? It can't be Tommy White. It is Tommy White. And I'm like, okay. People were telling me his defense is terrible. That doesn't look
He
right.
made one play. It was like a soft pop fly over third base that you would have thought it would have been the shortstop's ball. And Tommy, like, he looked like Gronk going over the middle with an over the shoulder catch. It truly, and again, I know that LSU fans have been trying to tell us, hey, Tommy White's been better. Tommy White's been better. He only has one error this year. Like, he truly has taken a giant step forward. And credit to the LSU coaching staff, and then credit for Tommy White for putting in the work. Because again, that was kind of his biggest flaw from a draft standpoint, is that he didn't field the ball very well. So, his hitting is down a little bit this year over last year, but again, I think that he's kind of going to work himself into that 2025 range, where before he was going to be a compensatory pick.
Yeah, and also shout out to LSU fans. This whole series, I believe, will be broken down and talked about by our very own Alex and Jason on Tiger Talk next week. So you're going to want to keep an eye on that. But Jake, with LSU playing much better than they had early in conference play, how dangerous are they moving forward?
I think they are a scary team to see in a regional. Gage Jump and Luke Holman, they're going to have a chance to win both of those games that they start in. And if they can stay on the right side of the bracket, I mean, I don't know. They did this thing last year where their bullpen really struggled. And then when they got into the tournament play, like Thatcher Hurd was electric. Griffin Herring took big step forwards. Guidry was good. So you really kind of have to worry about that. And then, I don't think the lineup's where it was last year. But again, it's Travinsky's going to give you a home run in a weekend. Tommy White's going to give you about 300. Jared Jones has really taken a big step forward. They're starting to kind of figure out the outfield pieces a little bit more than before. I really like what Ashton Larson does again, because I think he's been their best hitter in SEC play. I think he's hitting over 400 is what they were saying on the broadcast last night. And he was a guy that you really didn't expect to get a ton of at-bats. So again, LSU's kind of starting to figure it out. They worked through and they know what they have now. And I think going forward, this LSU team is going to be a scary one. And it really wouldn't surprise me to see them make it to a super regional. They are set up better to win a super regional than a regional.
And it's interesting, sometimes getting punched in the mouth early on in the season really pays off later on, because if you get punched in the mouth again, you know everything's going to be okay, as opposed to it being the first time and starting to panic. So LSU looking like they're in a really good position moving forward with the way they're playing. Talking about one of my favorite games from last night, I love pitchers duel. We had Kansas State and Kansas. Kansas State ended up they were down 2-1 in the seventh. They ended up coming back. In the eighth, they ended up coming back, winning 3-2. Just great stuff between Reese Dutton and Owen Barima. Both go 7 innings. Reese Dutton just left in just a little bit too long, because it was 2-1 going into the eighth. But Kansas State getting a very gritty win. Kansas, they get some power with 2 home runs, but unfortunately nobody on base when those home runs happen. From a pitching standpoint, that's what you want to see. If you give up home runs, they're going to happen. Giving them up with nobody on base is going to be huge. Big win in this rivalry matchup between 2 Big 12 teams that are fighting to get into the tournament. Are they both projected in right now, Jake?
Kansas State is just above the cut line, and then Kansas is the first Big 12 team out. They're kind of in that logjam. But again, they've played themselves into a very good spot. They play Kansas State and Texas, so they have chances to pick up really good wins. But again, the one thing that really made me nervous, because this was a game that I actually tuned into, was Tyson Neighbors. Those were some tense at bats, and he really couldn't find the zone there for a little bit. And just credit to him to kind of come in and slam the door when he doesn't have his best stuff. And then again, the Kansas State lineup, I think, is one of those ones too where you really do kind of start to fear it. Kalen Culpepper is a bona fide first rounder. Brody Day is another one that really kind of, or Brady Day. Yeah,
Brady Day. Yeah. We'll get to him later.
Yes. They just continue to impress in every way, shape, or form. They've been punched in the mouth a ton this season, but again, I think that they're a team that's set up a lot better for a regional than a super regional. So if they can get in, they're going to be a very dangerous team, because the amount of bullpen guys that they can run out is truly just mind-boggling. Seems like every guy that they run out, there's 95.
And the other thing with Kansas State, props to them for the scheduling they've done. Like, that's part of why they've been punched in the mouth. They've played a really difficult schedule, and I love that they did that.
Yeah, they went out to Arizona
Clemson?
earlier. I don't think they went to Vegas. So that was OU. But yeah,
No.
they played a good schedule, and they really are set up with a little bit of a buffer that last year, that they didn't have. They were probably 65 of 64 last year. And again, wins like this are going to what gets you in the tournament. And like I said, Willie the Wildcat, I know, is smiling watching this game.
Yeah, and if you're on the Kansas side, you can't go Cody Shogun Shogun. You want to help me, Jake, with this name?
What?
Cody Shogunaga. There we go.
There you go.
And Collier Cranford, they can't go 0-for-8 if Kansas wants to win a ball game. So looking forward, you want to move them, get them, hitting, get them going, and they'll be a little bit better off. But yeah, I love pitching duels, so this was a really fun game for me to tune into last night.
Yeah, and we're talking so great about the pitchers. I feel like this next one's gonna be like 10-8 or something like that, 12-10.
No, it's Texas, Oklahoma State, so not too bad. You have the sheet. You knew what was coming next if you wanted to look. Oh, you're talking about the next game today for Kansas and Kansas State. I completely misunderstood. I thought you were talking about on the sheet, but
no.
Yeah, we're talking Texas, Oklahoma State. Texas getting the win against Oklahoma State. Jake, what is going on in the Big 12? I can't figure it out.
Well, there seemed to be a few absolutes that we had come to understand in the Big 12. Is that Texas really can't win Friday night starts. This was, I think, their first win in Big 12 play on a Friday night. The thing that really kind of starts to scare me a lot about this Texas team is the power that they have. I mean, Gasparino's really kind of started to figure it out. He had a home run. Kimball Schuessler really has some light tower power. Peyton Powell has the ability to kind of put it over the fence. And they went toe-to-toe with a team that probably can do it a little bit better than them. I know Schubart and Bench have the ability to just bang it around the yard. And again, Oklahoma State's like probably the Big 12 favorite. And Texas in the last 2 weeks, if they can go 4-2 against 1-2 in the Big 12, I think that almost makes them feel like a lock into the tournament. I know that they still have Kansas and there's still like a lot of places, but it always seems to set up for Texas to host. I know that that's kind of the one thing that Noah always gives me crap about. They're really not too far away from being a host. And I mean that truthfully. Just the run that they have had 2 weeks, it's one of those things too where if you're sitting here thinking and they're 1-3 instead of 3-1, that they're likely a tournament miss. But just the margins in the Big 12 have been so thin. I really, really like what Texas is doing forward, and nobody wants Texas to be a 3 in their regional. They have the ability, I think, to even go to Omaha.
Well, they didn't. They weren't set up to host last year. They had to go to Coral Gables and take care of business there, which they did. But yeah,
they were robbed too, Monty, if you remember correctly.
Yes,
there are a lot of people that thought that they should have been the host over Oklahoma State.
Yes, and now they're getting their revenge on a Friday night with a 7-5 win. But yeah, I mean, I expect better from this Oklahoma State lineup. They've got a lot of big names there. But I will say we've got the RPI isn't going to get to hosting range unless they finish 7-1 or better and do well in Arlington. What are your thoughts on that?
It is true, but again, I think that Oklahoma's either around 500 or under 500 out of conference. Oklahoma State has some really, really bad losses on their resume, so it's not too terrible. And they have said too that they are going to rely solely on the RPI this year. I think Texas is a lot. If they win the Big 12 outright, which they have a shot to do, I think that they're going to be the host. Their out of conference schedule isn't that terrible.
All right, moving along to the ACC. We had a thriller last night. NC State, Florida State, 8-7 final score. NC State on the road in Tallahassee getting the W. There was a lightning delay in about the third inning. Jamie Arnold, his worst start of the season. He was, still may be, the front runner for ACC Pitcher of the Year, but he has his worst start by far. Gives up 5 earned runs in 3 innings, takes the L. He did not come back after the lightning delay. Neither did Sam Highfill for NC State. The big loss here, despite NC State's win, Shane Van Dam injured. He is a very, very, very important part of this NC State baseball team, and if he's down, that is catastrophic. But
they really have had the injury bug for like the
yeah,
last couple
yep.
weeks.
So they get Noah Souls back. Noah Souls, that was his first game back yesterday since disappearing with an unknown injury. But Josh Hogue last week fractured his leg in I think 2 places. He's out for the year, obviously. But yeah, it has not been good. Obviously, they started the season losing Matt Willardson. Logan Whitaker has still been out with an unknown injury. Shane Van Dam has been the bullpen ace. One of 3 guys they could really depend on with Derek Smith and Jacob Duden. Now it's Derek Smith and Jacob Duden on their own. Hopefully Shane Van Dam is hopefully it's something minor. We don't have any information. We're not going to speculate, but losing him for any significant amount of time is going to be a big loss. But don't let that take away from what's a monster win last night on the road in Tallahassee.
Yeah, I mean, they got to go toe-to-toe with Jamie Arnold. Again, he looked human. I know that's not something that we've been able to say about him too much this season. And again, to go on the road into Tallahassee, I went last year when they were terrible, and that was still probably one of the best environments. So I couldn't have imagined what that place was like on a Friday night top 25 matchup. And NC State always does just enough, it seems like, to like keep us talking about them. Like that, you always want to write them off. You're like, okay, yeah, like if they go into Florida State, get swept, like they're done. We'll kind of just kick them to a 2 or 3 line, and they always do just enough to kind of tease us a little bit. They win these games like this. It's just really what were you saying, Money?
Well, I was going to say what's crazy is we thought we kind of had them figured out that they're a decent team, but couldn't win on the road, right? And they had lost to Louisville and Georgia Tech, and then what do? They go on the road and take 2 of 3 from top 5 team in Clemson, and now they're on the road again.
Yeah, and they beat Florida State with Jamie Arnold, like.
Right, and without Shane Van Dam, because he only pitched an inning. Sam Heifel only pitched, I think, 2. But Cooper Consiglio, as a freshman, comes in and just tosses 4.1 innings of 1-run relief and holds off one of the best lineups in the country. I mean, James Tibbs still went 2 for 4 with a moonshot and 3 RBIs. Marco Dingus also had a home run, but that was his only hit of the game.
You did talk about their bullpen at the beginning of the year, how they had a lot of guys, but a lot of unknowns. Like, I remember you saying that. Like, the list, I think, was like 10 or 15 deep because there were just so many unknowns. And
yeah,
they can just do stuff like that. It's just an insane thing that they have the ability to just run out the amount of guys that they have. Because, again, Florida State's not like a bad lineup. Like, I think they're one of the best lineups in the ACC.
I think they're one of the best lineups in the country. I mean, they are very, very
I think
good.
being the best lineup in the ACC and being one of the best lineups in the country go hand in hand.
Right.
Money. But I mean, just the way that they kind of go about their business too. I mean, they like Florida State's going to like strike fear into people when they get into regionals, and NC State with kind of the ragtag Arizona Diamondbacks level of kind of moxie go in and steal a Friday night game from Florida State.
Yeah, and puts them in great position to win this series on the road.
The power of friendship, Money.
All right. Alec Makarovich hits another home run. He's on fire. And I also tweeted this out. Jacob Kozart had a home run. Do you think any sibling, any pair of siblings have more home runs than the Kozart brothers this season? You think they lead the country?
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there are any other brothers.
Oh, there's plenty of other brothers, but I don't know how many of them have combined for like 35 home runs. So, moving along, Georgia. I believe this is another run rule. 10-0 over Vanderbilt. Leighton Finley. Absolutely sensational start for him. Jake, talk us through it.
Yeah, I mean, this is his 3rd kind of quality start back-to-back again. Season high in innings and Ks. So that's kind of going to be where he lives. And again, anytime Georgia gets 3, 4, 5 runs only allowed, you feel really, really good about them going forward. And again, Charlie Condon just continues to impress in every way, shape, and form. He's now 1 back of Ivan Melendez and 2 back of Kaggs' record. So expect those to be kind of falling soon as well. Again, Slade Alford continues to impress. He's just been on an absolute tear again as well. They really have one of the best kind of 1-2-3s in the country. And again, RJ Austin, they're really trying to do whatever they can with him. He's let off a lot. He batted in the 3rd. Cunningham was wild. As you see, he had those 4 walks and only 70 pitches. But you know that meme of like the hot guy where it's like hello, like oh yeah, great, and then it goes to like the HR thing, hello HR.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about Georgia and Vandy because they both sit at 11-11 in SEC play, and Georgia's kind of our media darling. We all love talking about Charlie Condon, and we're like, yeah, like they could be a host, like da 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 da. And then Vandy is 11-11. It's the same, and I feel like the sky is falling every time Vanderbilt loses. Like they have been going through it the last few weeks.
Yeah. What number home run, by the way, was that from Condon?
31.
That is. Do we know what the NCAA record is?
It's Cags with post BB Core era, and then the guy from Oklahoma State hit 48, which I don't think he even touches that. But again,
Yeah.
they played more games back then. They had better bats back then. But it's the fact that somebody would hit 50 in a college season just seems crazy. Because again,
31 seems pretty nuts.
yeah, again, Melendez was in 22.
Yep.
Cags was last year. Like, are we going to see somebody else come in? And is Jay Slavalette going to break this record next year? Like, there really is the Gorilla Ball 2.0. And again, it would be almost fitting, I feel like, that Condon broke the home run record this year because I feel like every single time on Twitter I see so-and-so broke the season high school record for home runs. So-and-so, like, I think that the tally's up to like 10 or 15. Like, it's just been an insane season for home runs.
Yep, we'll see if he can do any more today. It is at Georgia. I hope the weather has gone through there. I'm not sure what it's looking like today, but I know obviously Clemson had made their adjustments in South Carolina. Being in South Carolina, being right next to Georgia, but geography lesson for those that didn't know that. Moving along, we have another big ACC game. You guys might not think this was a huge one, but I'd been talking. Notre Dame takes a massive, massive hit here. They had a path, I think, to the NCAA tournament. Jake doesn't necessarily agree, but I think they had a path to the NCAA tournament if they go 5-1 in conference play against Notre Dame or against Pitt at home and Louisville on the road, with the way their RPI is and everything. But I think if they didn't sweep Pitt, I don't see them going 5-1. I don't think they can go to Louisville and win 3. I don't know if they can go to Louisville and win 2, but that's at least manageable. I don't think sweeping Louisville on the road is really in the cards, especially with the way Louisville's playing. But Ryan Andrade, absolutely dazzling performance last night, 7.1 innings, just the one earned run given up towards the end of that outing, 97 pitches. And then Phil Fox comes in with Notre Dame having the go-ahead, the tying runs on second and third in the 8th inning with 1 out, and Phil Fox pitches out of the jam. No inherited runners score. Just absolutely great performance by Pitt. So now it's looking like Jake's original thing that Notre Dame has to win the ACC tournament to get in is looking correct. I'm going to have to agree with you now, Jake. I think they needed to sweep Pitt.
Yeah, they needed, like you said, 5-1, however they can get it. I don't think that they're going to win the next 2 and then go to Louisville and sweep them, especially with how the Notre Dame plays on the road. Did you like my Luke Canwell tweet, Monty?
I didn't see it. What was it?
I said that he needs to start changing his name to Luke Canwell, the way he hits.
Yeah, he's a very underrated hitter.
Yeah,
I really
the
like
whole Pitt team really feels underrated. They've had a few things not go their way. I think that they're a lot better than their record shows in ACC play. They have the ability, I think, to beat anybody in the country.
And this was a massive bounce back after getting run ruled at PNC Park to their biggest rival in the midweek. People were not happy with how Pitt played against West Virginia in that game in the backyard brawl.
Were you people, Monty?
No, I'm just saying people were not pleased. So it's good to see Pittsburgh respond with this kind of display against Notre Dame team that's been really, really good at home.
So they sit 2 back of Miami and Boston College and a game back of Notre Dame. What do you give Pitt's chances to make the ACC tournament?
It's going to be tough. They're going to have to go to Miami and try and win a series there with the Mark-Light Magic. But that's really what it's going to come down to, I think, between those two.
You don't think Boston College can kind of play their way down?
They can. I thought Boston College was looking good, but they're 1-7, I think, in their last 8 ACC games.
They're 6-14 at home too, as well.
Yeah. So it's going to be really interesting to see who gets on. We'll be talking about that on Monday on the ACC show. I think there's also stories coming for or articles coming for that. So moving along to the West Coast. Nope, not yet.
The West Coast.
the West Coast for me. No, we're headed to Oklahoma, Texas Tech. Again, the Big 12, a little bit crazy. Oklahoma gets the 8-0 win. Braden Davis, fantastic start, 7 innings, no earned runs, 8 strikeouts. And, of course, John Spikerman leading the offensive charge there.
Yeah, I mean, it's been really, really tough sledding. Post West Virginia, when they went in and swept them at Dan Law, they are 0-4 in Big 12 play, and now they sit under 500. This was one that Tech really, really needed to be competitive in, even just to pass an eye test. Tech had 4 errors, so that was not the eye test that they were looking for. Braden Davis just continues to impress. This is his 3rd straight quality outing. He had a bad one against Lamar, and ever since then, it really kind of seemed like, you never really want to lose a series, but it seemed like that Lamar series kind of woke everybody in Oklahoma up. Spikerman's been taking quality at bats. Jackson Nicklaus has been really, really tremendous. And Anthony McKenzie over from Sam Houston, he's continued to impress in every way, shape, or form. Cash's double was really the only hard hit ball of the entire game. As the other one was kind of an infield single. They did have a few walks and a little bit of traffic on the paces, but Braden Davis really did a tremendous job of limiting it. It was an off night, I think, for Oklahoma's office, and they broke through in the 5th. So this is going to be one where, we always talk about how can your pitchers pitch when they don't have their off stuff? Well, how can your lineup kind of attack when you know that stuff's not falling their way? And again, I think that this was about an A+ win from Oklahoma because, again, this is a very, very desperate Texas Tech team. I think Oklahoma is really starting to play their way into being that host conversation with Texas, Oklahoma State. It really feels like Oklahoma State are kind of the front runners.
Yeah, who beat Oklahoma?
Pitt.
Yeah, they did. Run ruled them. I just like shouting out Pitt whenever I can, because I'm a real Pitt fan. Big win for Oklahoma. Now we're moving out to the West Coast. Now we're there. Cal Poly with a big win over UC Irvine, 10-5. Pretty good game for the most part, and then Cal Poly ended up just running away with it.
Yeah, that's kind of this is one of the ones that I was tuning into too as well. Cal Poly, I think, had a big 7th or 8th inning. Nick Pinto was really good for them, but you could tell he kind of started to tire, and then none of the bullpen behind him really kind of picked him up. But Monty and I were talking about it offline, like just the amount of big guys that Cal Poly was able to do, and the amount of big guys that were able to score from second base, I think was just the craziest part for me, because they were waving him around, and they showed some speed. I was really, really impressed with Cal Poly. Unfortunately, with the way that the Big West is, it doesn't really matter because there's no tournament. But again, Irvine's got to start winning and sweeping these games. I know that they had won 8 in a row before this, but again, it feels like everybody's looking for a reason for Arizona to be in there, and Irvine needs to win these type of games.
Yeah, and I always kind of like tuning in to see Cal Poly, to see Ryan Stafford. He went 3 for 5. He's one of the better catchers in the country. I believe he represented Team USA in the summer. It's not that I believe he did. He definitely did. I know he did. Always fun to see some Cal Poly, UC Irvine. But yeah, they're looking for that West Coast host. Who's going to be that team? And the way Arizona's been playing, they got a win last night right over Stanford. So
yes.
That's another feather in Chip Hale's cap there for Arizona. So it's going to be really interesting to see how UC Irvine can string some wins together. And our final matchup, another doubleheader yesterday. This series was supposed to start on Thursday. It started yesterday with a doubleheader. They split it, Tennessee and Florida. Tennessee with the win, 6-2 in the first game. Florida with the win in the second game, holding off the Tennessee offense. I'm shocked Tennessee only scored 9 runs yesterday.
Yeah, I was going to say that too. It really kind of felt like an off night for them. But again, is the Florida bullpen back? I felt like, Neely was decent, but the bullpen really pitched really good for Florida, and that has been truly their Achilles heel. Florida always just does just enough, I think, to make us talk about them. Because even then, they never put it together truly as a lineup. It seems like even in game 2 when they win because Brody Donay has a home run and a bunch of their guys go over. Like,
For the
what were you going to say, Money?
for those playing the drinking game at home, that is a sip, or anytime he mentions Brody Donay.
Brody Donay, Wallace Clark is kind of another one for those that are following along at home.
The all Jake team,
Anthony
Jake players.
McKenzie is he's one that someone pointed out that I always seem to love. I just love a good shortstop, Monty. I'm like the Padres. My whole team is just shortstops moving around.
Brody Donay is not a shortstop.
He's the outlier. He's the DH.
He had a home run in each of the 2 games. Billy Amick continues to just be, I mean, that's one of my favorite players since watching him break out with Clemson last year. But, I mean, it's the usual suspects for Tennessee's offense in Amick, Moore, and Burke. No home runs yesterday for Moore or Burke as they continue to battle for those records at the University of Tennessee.
This actually dropped Christian Moore's monthly average, by the way, like since April 1st. That's just almost crazy to think about that 4 for 10 drops your average.
Yeah, sources tell me he's really, really good.
Yeah, sources are correct.
So it's going to be interesting to see. Tennessee needs to make sure if they lose a series, it's not going to be a huge deal. Florida needs it more than Tennessee does, but Tennessee does not want to lose anything to Florida.
Yeah, that is kind of the good benefit of Kentucky falling as much as they have, is that Tennessee, the pressure for them to go in and win the East really isn't there anymore. So it's almost feels like a consolation prize now where neither of them really want to win it. But again, Florida always just does just enough to keep us like coming back, because they split. Like, if they can win today, like, is this one where they feel like you almost feel like they're just one series win away? And as long as they're not getting swept, like, you almost have to keep them in there because they're playing like, okay, they lost 1 of 3 to the number 2 team in the country, or 2 of 3 to the number 2 team in the country. Like, they do just enough to kind of tease us.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see who pulls out of that series. So we're going to end up finishing the rest of our show talking about some mid-major conference races. Obviously, we can't go through all the mid-majors. We don't have the time for that, but we wanted to highlight some specific conferences, specifically ones that are probably one bid conferences. So we're not talking about the Sun Belt. We're not talking about the CAA. We're looking at some of these really small conferences that have some drama going on down the line, because you're going to have one team get in, and then you're going to have teams that are having really good seasons not make it into the postseason. So we're gonna start here. We're going to talk about the A10, which is who I was watching yesterday. I was at Virginia Commonwealth. If you guys look, there are 5 teams within a game and a half of first place. By the way, only 7 teams make the tournament, so you've also got some drama going on down there at the bottom for that 7th and last seed. Currently, George Washington is in that spot, but Rhode Island is a game back of that, and then St. Joseph's and George Mason, they're only a game and a half back of that 7 seed. So a lot to look forward here. VCU had a chance to finish the day yesterday in first place. Unfortunately, they were unable to complete the doubleheader sweep of George Washington, but lots to go here. But you can look at the overall records here. You're going to have, with Dayton, St. Louis, and VCU, you're going to have two teams with really good seasons not make the postseason.
Yeah, and St. Louis, I feel like, has always flirted with being a lot better than they are. Like, it seems like every week we're sliding them in, sliding them out, sliding them in, sliding them out. But, my Fordham Rams, Bonnie, my favorite team that I love to talk about, they're playing really good baseball. And this is really kind of the first time, I think, in the history of the weekend rotation that we've talked about Fordham. And it's not been to talk about how great their stadium is. Like, they truly are in the fighting conversation to kind of go in there and win the A10. And again, there's a ton of quality baseball among these. I mean, Richmond's been pretty pesky when we've seen them play too. Yeah. Dayton's going to be a tough out. So there's a lot to really like about this A10 going forward. And again, there's only going to be one team here. There's not a NIT for baseball. Like,
right. And here's the thing. Here's the other thing. Like, I wish there was an NIT, because I feel like some teams deserve to continue going on, even if they don't deserve to be in the NCAA tournament. But the tournament winner is going to win. So, I mean, George Washington as the 7th seed could go in and go on a run. And then you have all 3 of those top teams having good seasons, not making it in.
Yeah.
Last
the
year,
Revolutionaries, they play good ball, not the Colonels. They're the Revolutionaries now.
They are. I had to double check that yesterday when I was writing up my recap for the game. But George Mason last year, they were the tournament champions. They were the 6th seed. And I believe St. Joseph's was the 1 seed, and they got knocked out pretty early, and that had to be pretty. That's just a brutal way to play baseball. But if you're looking forward to the A10, Dayton and Richmond are playing today. That's one team that's tied for first, one team that's currently in 5th. VCU is continuing its series, finishing its series with George Washington in a rubber match there. St. Louis is playing George Mason, and Fordham, I believe, is playing St. Joseph's. So lots to look for there in the A10. All those games should be available on ESPN+. Moving along, Jake is going to talk us through the A-Sun, which is a pretty fantastic mid-major conference.
Yeah, outside of the WAC, they probably have the weirdest, I think, tournament layout, as 1 through 4 get put in a pool for 3 spots, and then 5 and 8 get put in a pool for 1 spot, and then they play a semifinal game. So you really do want to try and be in the top 4 range. So we'll kind of focus on those. Stetson is 15-7. They took 2 of 3 from West Virginia to open the season, if you remember that correctly. They beat Austin Peay last night, who just has been on a tear as well. We'll kind of talk about them in a second. Stetson just loves to single you to death. I think that they're going to be a tough out. They really don't have a glaring hole. They seem to just kind of do everything exceptionally well. They really don't hit the ball hard, it seems like. But again, their pitching, I think, is a little bit better than a lot of the teams in the A-Sun. Austin Peay, like I mentioned, 16 of their 22 A-Sun games involved them scoring double digits. They have lost a few of those games, so it is not a foregone conclusion that they win those. Jacksonville, who holds the tiebreaker actually over Stetson, they are, they have a 2 of 3 over Stetson, but they sit 2 of 3 behind P. So if it kind of turns into there, that's kind of the one to kind of watch out for there. And again, Kennesaw State, that's kind of the one that Micah projects to go in. They are a really, really tough Friday night team. If they can kind of start to piece it together a little bit in the A-Sun, I think that they'll be a really, really dangerous team. Again, I really don't want to see in a regional. All the other one, Austin Peay, I feel like, if you can say like, oh, we have elite pitching, so that'll kind of be limited. Kennesaw is the one that I really, really fear. They dropped it last night to North Florida.
You mean the team that dog walked Kentucky and Clemson on a Friday night is a team that you fear?
Yes. Jacksonville lost last night. Kennesaw State lost last night. And then again, Lipscomb beat Tennessee. Central Arkansas gave LSU a lot of fits. Florida Gulf Coast is really kind of starting to play up. There's a lot to like. And again, you want to stay in that top 4 of this bracket. So there's going to be a lot of tension down the stretch because it's a lot easier to be 3 of 4 versus 1 of 4. Like, it's the weirdest tournament bracket I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, the A-Sun is an underrated baseball conference. I mean, there's a number of teams that here that I would not be surprised to see in the NCAA tournament, and would worry about. So, just some quality baseball. Moving along, we are now going to be talking about the SoCon. Yes, the Fighting Micah Conference. We've got a pretty clogged group up there after yesterday. East Tennessee State, they're not going to play today. I think they're going to do a doubleheader tomorrow due to the weather. They were originally going to play at like 9 a.m. this morning. Yeah, I watched a bit of theirs. They had a big game last night. Shout out to Carter Fink, who pitched for East Tennessee State against VMI yesterday in their 8-3 win. He went 7 innings of 1-run baseball, or might have been shutout baseball, but fantastic. You've got UNC Greensboro. We've already mentioned Caleb Cozart on the show for UNC Greensboro. He's been having a great season. And then Samford, obviously, they're right now the leaders in the clubhouse. They're down there in the great state of Alabama. But don't count out Wofford and Western Carolina. There's a lot of baseball to be played, but it's going to go down to the wire. And again, only one of these teams the winner of the
I don't,
conference
I don't
tournament.
know if Wofford or East Tennessee State could kind of play up. Like they both have really, really high RPIs.
That's
Like
true. I think
I
East Tennessee
believe
State had 55 going into yesterday.
Wofford, I believe, is the highest non-bubble. Like they're the highest RPI we left off, bubble included. So they really kind of, if they can kind of play their way in, if they get on a run in the the SoCon tournament, like this is one where you could kind of put it on two bid watch. Like it really almost feels like it's right there. It's going to be tough. It's going to be uphill, but this is like one of the better conferences I think in the country. This is what I think people in the SEC think the Sun Belt is. Like,
Yep. So real quick, East Tennessee State is at 60 now. UNC Greensboro's at 63. Walford's at 74.
they did lose last night to Gardner Webb. That probably just tanked their RPI.
Probably a little bit, and I think, but Gardner Webb I think leads their conference. I think they're in the conversation for that. It might be USC Upstate that leads that. The Big
USC
South.
Upstate leads. I think Gardner Webb's under 500.
Oh, okay. Well, then never
Yeah,
mind. That's
yeah.
not good.
Gardner Webb has an RPI of 233.
Oof.
Yeah, that definitely tanked it.
Yeah. So Wolford's got some work to do, but East Tennessee State, I mean, it's funny they dropped 5 spots despite a win against VMI, but they're looking pretty good. They've had some, I mean, Purdue, that Purdue series is looking really good for them as well. So
Yeah, that's one too. As Purdue's RPI rises, East Tennessee State's is going to rise.
Yeah, by the way, I'm wearing the East Tennessee hat today for the show. No one's pointed that out. The Fighting Micahs, as we like to call them.
And then we've been set up with the East Tennessee State gear, Monty.
Well, I mean, I've been an East Tennessee fan for a long time. Ever since I heard about them months ago. Anyway, no, I was just
Chesney guy, Monty.
Yeah, sure. Moving along now, we're going out west. We got a west team. We got some west teams in there. This is normally a conference that I think can sometimes get more than one bid, but what's it looking like this season?
Yep. For reference, we're looking at top 6. So right where Pepperdine is the cut line. They reseed after the first, so you really kind of do want to be the number 1 seed. I know that a lot of times we say like, oh, it doesn't really matter. This one, it really does. San Diego is truly playing their way into being a host. They almost feel like a lock at this point. They have 5 guys that have over 30 RBIs. They love to kind of bang the ball around the yard. Portland's in the driver's seat, but they lost to LMU last night. That really is kind of going to take a damper to it. They need to kind of come back, win those next 2. As again, they sit a little bit behind San Diego in the loss column. Again, going forward, there are going to be some buys. I know that in the Big 12 they play like some kind of nonsense opponent. West Coast Conference doesn't mess with that. They just take the weekend off. That's kind of a weird thing about it. Gonzaga at the 4, they were really hot, but they had a terrible out of conference. They're at 5-18 outside of conference. Again,
oh wow.
Yeah, so if they win it, they really are kind of dragging everybody down. So hopefully they can kind of, I never really want to root for people to lose, but if the West Coast Conference wants to be a 2-bid lead, Gonzaga needs to not be in the conversation for winning. St. Mary's is a really talented team. They sit 11-5. They have series wins over Gonzaga and San Diego. Christian Alaminza has 21 home runs. That's a school record for them. He's hitting 380. He kind of carries that offense. And then again, Santa Clara, they've just played a really tough schedule. They played a lot of the best teams in front of them. They've been in those series, but again, I think that this is going to be one where you watch out. If San Diego hosts, it's a 2-bid league because I think Portland's going to be a very dangerous too. St. Mary's, I don't think that's a team that I'd want to play. But again, if I really want to root for Gonzaga because that 5-18 out of conference, I think would be hilarious if they made the tournament.
Yes, everyone's here for your amusement, Jake.
I rooted for Tulane. I rooted for George Mason. Big Summit League guy, whichever Summit League team gets in. I think it'd be really funny for Gonzaga to go to A&M. That would be perfect, I think, because Gonzaga, they're terrible out of conference, but they win in a tough conference.
All right, we are moving back to the East Coast. The Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference. They want to make sure they're not confused with the MAC. I think that's why they added that athletic in there. You've got a lot of teams in there fighting for some spots here. You've got Fairfield and Niagara there at 14-2, but Ryder's interesting because they were really bad when they went on the road to Duke, when Micah was at Duke for the first time with at Jack Coombs. Ryder had been really, really poor out of conference, but they have rebounded. They're looking good. They're only 2.5 games back, and of course, they're a threat to win the tournament. But you got to like the way, Eric Radizak for Niagara, he's hitting .419 on the year. You've got their pitching's really good. Zach Cameron's got 6 wins for them with a 3 ERA on the dot. But Fairfield, they've got the top 3 home run hitters in the conference with Ethan Hibbard, Matt Bergevin, and Matt Bucciero. I'm sorry if I butchered your name, but they're the top 3 home run hitters with 16, 16, and 13 home runs respectively. So it's going to be a really fun race to see who comes down and comes out between Niagara, Fairfield, Ryder, and the rest. I mean, obviously,
well, Mount St. Mary's just swept Ryder yesterday in a doubleheader, so there's some meat on those bones there.
Right. So, and again, a team gets hot in the conference tournament and it changes everything anyway.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about this one. This seems like one of those ones where someone's going to come out of nowhere and kind of go in and win it. It wouldn't surprise me if Fairfield and Niagara are both sitting at home.
Which, again, this is why I would love an NIT or something, because, these teams are having great seasons. They deserve a postseason, even if they don't deserve to be in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I mean, Clover Stadium's a tough place to go in and win a tournament, Monty. That's where they're playing it. So yes, that's the one with the train that kind of goes along like by the side. It's one of they have like a train system that goes around the whole stadium. Highly recommended if anybody's in the New York upstate area to go out and see this game.
Sounds like I'm going. Yep. And now we're going to highlight our last mid-major conference. We're sticking in this area, the Northeast Conference.
Yes. So first off, I really want to give a shout out to University of Maryland Eastern Shore. They sit at 0-41 on the season, 0-23 in conference. They have Delaware State in a series. They have George Mason in a series. And they finish it up with Sacred Heart, who sits right at the top there. So it might look like a winless season for them because it's going to be pretty tough sledding. I think that, Sacred Heart's in a league of their own in this conference already, and they really need it. Delaware State's in a league of their own. It might, I never want to root for people to lose, but there's going to need to be a lot of prayers said for East Shore to win a game.
I am now jumping on the University of Maryland Eastern Shore bandwagon. We need that one win.
Monty,
yeah.
I want to do a bet with you. Okay, I'm going to be a Scrooge. If Maryland Eastern Shore loses, it goes winless the rest of the season, you owe me a bottle of Old Bay vodka. But if they win, I'll send you a bottle of Old Bay vodka if they win a game. So, the writing's on the wall for the East Shore guys.
All right, fair enough. So let's, I'm on the bandwagon. Let's see if they can get a W. But, at the top though, you've got a crowded group again.
It's very, very crowded. They take the top 6. So that's kind of where you want to be in that cut line again. Fairleigh Dickinson was in the race last year. Central Connecticut's kind of a team that we've seen in the tournament a little bit. Wagner, who I was told by Texas fans at the beginning of the season that they are statistically one of the worst teams in the country. They went out and they got swept by North Carolina opening weekend. They got swept by Texas A&M a week later. They really went and took it on the chin there. So while they are 23-23, there's a lot of games in there that no one had any business of them winning. So again, I think that it kind of created a resiliency in this team, which they're kind of the one that I project to come out of this. And again, Long Island, they're one that we're kind of looking to make the tournament. Again, they had a merger, I think, about 5 or 6 years ago. So I don't think they've ever been to the tournament as a baseball team under this iteration. But again, I think that this is going to be a very, very exciting conference. But this one's probably going to go to one of those SEC schools, unfortunately, and just get their teeth kicked in.
Hey, you never know. Baseball's a funny game. And even if you get kicked in by an SEC school, you've got opportunities. It's a double elimination tournament. I mean, George Mason was considered the lowest team in the tournament last year, in terms of ranking, and they eliminated Maryland. So, just because you lose that first round game, or there's an opportunity to make some noise against some of the other seeds as well.
Yes, and again, baseball is a weird game. But I would be very shocked if any of these teams kind of go in and win a tournament game. And
I would not be, because I believe in these teams, and
credit
Jake
to
clearly
these
does not.
conferences. I'm not going to name names, but there is still a conference that doesn't do a conference tournament. So credit to these teams for still having conference tournaments and giving everybody a fair shot.
You just named one
Who?
earlier. The West Coast Conference.
That's the only. No, it's the Big West.
Oh, the Big West.
The
Oh,
Big
you
West.
said it with UC Irvine. You didn't say it with the one we just did. You were talking about the Big West when
Yeah,
we
the
were
Big West does
talking.
not do a conference tournament. They're the only one in the country. Even the Summit League, which I think only can get how a Summit League team is able to steal a bid is just beyond me. But I guess that's a conversation for a different day.
Jake is just anti-small schools getting into the NCAA tournament. Jake, even the Ivy League has a tournament, right?
Yes, they do top
And
four.
and they don't do basketball. They don't have a basketball tournament, because remember, the automatic bid in basketball for the Ivy League goes right to the regular season champion. So
Yes, I know we didn't talk about the Ivy. Columbia's far and away running away with that conference. The were they? I don't know. You're gonna have to fact check me on that one. I do not follow NEC baseball that close. American
wow.
East, Bryant is running away with that division. Patriot League, Army is running away there.
Well,
Bowling Green.
Navy is right there with Army.
Although Army did take 2 of 3 from them last
Yes.
weekend.
Yep.
So, the Army and Navy gets into a really tough one because, when it's Army Bucknell, everybody's like, oh, yeah, you got to root for the troops, which I don't think there's a team in the country that's hated more than Bucknell, because everybody always roots for Army. Everybody always roots for Navy. No
I
one
don't think
roots for
it's
Bucknell Bison.
I mean, speak for yourself. I'm a big Bucknell guy.
Would you cheer for Bucknell over Army?
I'm not answering that on air. But no, no. And Columbia has clinched the regular season championship in the Ivy League, correct?
Yes, they have. They clinched it last weekend. They went out and played a tough schedule too, so they're going to be a little bit more battle tested. Penn, though, don't sleep on Penn to kind of come out of there as well. I think it's Penn and Columbia are the two.
It's true. I mean, they recently have been the two big schools, I think, in the
Yep.
in the last 2
Hayden
or 3
Schott
years.
came over from Columbia last year. He's a mainstay in the A&M lineup. Jackson Appel, who's A&M's 4-hole hitter, came over for Columbia. They have another A&M signee already. So, A&M started into Columbia 2.0.
On the
People
Penn
always
side,
confuse those two schools.
No, they don't. On the Penn side, you've got Ben Miller, who's at Duke now, and not Josefino, but Owen Cody at Virginia. That I believe Owen Cody was the Friday night guy for Penn last year, a regional team that was on the brink of getting to a super regional. And Ben Miller's got arguably the nicest mustache in the country.
And it's your co-host, right?
No.
Oh, who's your co-host?
Chad Knight is.
I knew it's one of those Ivy League guys. Which, by the way,
nope. He's been at Duke the entire time.
Oh, dang! I know I just feel like an idiot. But just to plug Monty's show, the Nerdcast is what I've nicknamed it, much to Monty's dismay. It's a great listen, though. I've listened to it, I think, twice, because the first time I didn't really understand it, and then the second time it was like seeing a movie where you got to watch it again. So it warrants multiple viewings, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and it's a great show. I've brought on Chad Knight, who is he's played 133 career games for Duke. He's still there. He's their one of their glue guys in the locker room, and gets a lot of pinch hitting appearances. But he's a very smart guy, and we're talking a lot about advanced analytics. So we spend some of the time talking about Duke and the ACC and stuff like that, and then we start talking about some of the advanced statistics. This last week's show is available on YouTube to watch.
It's on Spotify, I think, too, right?
I think so. And we talk about hitter archetypes and really finding a way to fit guys into certain archetypes that are easier than just going, oh, they're like this guy, but it kind of takes some of that eye test stuff out of it a little bit, with just in terms of pure hitting.
Yeah, boiling people down to numbers, Monty, one of my favorite business practices.
Yeah. So yeah, Chad has an economics background from Duke, so that's part of why that we end up talking
Monty
that.
just
But
gravitates towards people with economics degrees, I guess.
anyway, yeah, that the next show will be on. Will probably be released on Tuesday. We're recording on Monday ahead of our live ACC show. So that'll be exciting stuff to look forward to. Chad sounds like he's in for the rest of the season. We'll probably be releasing episodes on Tuesday until the ACC tournament and NCAA tournament, where we got to work around his baseball schedule.
All right, Monty, I think that's all we have time for. Something cool is getting cut, I guess. I
Oh
guess we'll have
yeah,
to find cool things
this
next week.
this whole show was cool. You know why? Because you and I did it together. Power of friendship.
The power, like we're the NC State Wolfpack. We just have the power of friendship.
Anyway, for Jake McKeever, I'm Monty Taylor. This has been another episode of the Weekend Rotation.